cops and other law enforcement people of Reddit. What case made you believe in the paranormal? Story 1. I worked for 911. A call came in from an off-duty officer. He'd rushed home because his teenage son heard someone in a back room, things moving, a door slamming. He wanted backup to clear the residence, while keeping him on the line. I looked up the home's history. An older gentleman had passed away in that very house about a year earlier. A chill went down my spine. I asked how long they'd lived there. "We just moved in," he said. After backup arrived, they cleared the house. No one was inside. I knew in my heart it wasn't a burglar they were looking for. It was the old man who died there. Story 2. My boyfriend is an officer. He once responded to a call from a woman who heard something in her kitchen. He and his partner cleared the house, finding nothing. As they stood in the living room reassuring her that all was in order, they all heard a crash from the kitchen. When they went to look, every single cabinet door was wide open and the dining chairs had been pushed up, leaning against the table. The woman didn't stay in the house that night. Story 3. I'm a cop in Alaska. My partner and I responded to a call on the outskirts of town. A family heard someone howling like a wolf from under their back deck. On the way, we learned the neighbor had a history of calling about break-ins, convinced someone was targeting him, though we never found tracks in the snow. That night he'd fired his gun at his own house, thinking he saw an intruder in the window. We assumed he was the one howling. But when we arrived, there were no footprints around the deck, nothing. The wife then mentioned that a week prior, during the neighbor's last episode, she saw a skinny man with long dark hair run from the neighbor's property into the deep woods. We searched further and found a single set of tracks leading from another house, deeper into the forest, where the trail simply vanished. Maybe the neighbor wasn't crazy after all. Story 4. I'm a security officer at a metal foundry in the middle of nowhere, built on the back of an old graveyard from an 1800s smallpox epidemic. We all see things here. For me, the event that truly spooked me happened one night in the main offices. I saw a door at the end of the hall swing shut. No one else should have been on site. I took off running. As I burst through that door, I saw another door further down the next hall slam shut. Impossible. No one could move that fast. I rushed to that door and saw a final office door close. They were cornered. I burst in. The room was empty. Not a soul. Things like this happen weekly. Now I've started finding children's dolls and hand-drawn pentagrams scattered around the plant. I need to check if my contract covers demons. Story 5. I worked undercover narcotics in the 90s. I spent months building a case on a Dominican crew in Washington Heights, posing as a dealer. The time came for the final buy. 2 kilos. I was wired up, backup team ready. As I got out of my car, a feeling of absolute dread washed over me. It was a cold physical sensation, a primal fear in my gut telling me something was terribly wrong. A voice inside my head started repeating, "Don't go, don't go, don't go." I tried to shake it, but I was trembling, weighed down by an eerie chill. I gave in. I walked past the building, called off the operation, and returned to my car with tears of fright in my eyes. Hours later, around the time I was supposed to be in that apartment, my sergeant gets a call. My contact and 2 of his crew had pulled guns on each other. A bloody shootout. Everyone was dead. Was I supposed to be part of that equation? I'll never know. I never experienced that level of fear again. Story 6. This is a story from a guy I worked with in the Air Force while stationed in Germany. He rented a small basement apartment. One night he woke to see a dark shadow person standing in front of his window. He jerked awake and it was gone. The chilling part, his bed was pushed flush against that wall. There was no room for a person to stand there. This happened every night for 2 weeks, always at 3 a.m. He'd see the figure, it would vanish, and he'd be unable to sleep. Eventually he just accepted the routine. One morning, at 3:15, as he sat on the couch with his coffee, a fireball erupted from the stove, igniting a nearby houseplant. He put the fire out. He was never bothered by the dark shadow again. Story 7. I'm a detective. I was called to the scene of a death, a gunshot wound to the head in an unfinished basement. I had to wait over 4 hours for the State Investigation Bureau to arrive. I agreed to secure the scene alone. I sent the deputies away, locked the house down, and sat in a chair by the only exit. The body about 50 feet away in my line of sight. After about 45 minutes of silence, I heard it. A loud hissing sound, immediately followed by what sounded like an open hand slapping a flat surface. The sounds came directly from where the victim was lying. The house was empty. The doors were locked. I was the only living soul inside. I went outside and waited in my car with the engine running. The medical examiner later laughed and said bodies make all kinds of weird noises. I'm sure the hiss was gas escaping. But the loud smack, I still can't explain that. Story 8. I was a cable technician. I had a job at an old Roman-style apartment building, training a new employee. The customer, a sweet older woman, told us the previous satellite tech had come to run new lines, left his tools in her apartment, went into the building's padlocked basement, and was never seen again. His truck was gone, but his tools remained. The company just said he refused to go back. I had to go into that same basement. The trainee refused to enter. It was pitch black. In the center of the room was a huge, ancient boiler, like the heart of a monster. I had to go to the far side of the room. I felt an intense apprehension, like I was being stared at with murderous intent. I started talking to myself, apologizing for being there. I was halfway done when I was forcefully shoved into the wall. I finished my work, backed out of the room, and my heart was pounding. My back started to burn. The trainee looked and saw 10 red marks on my back, perfectly matching 2 hands that had pushed me. He quit at the end of the day. Story 9. My husband is a cop. He was called to an alarm tripped from inside a vacant house. He and his partner arrived to find the house locked up tight. No signs of forced entry. They looked through the windows. The house was completely empty, except for a single, framed photograph hanging on a wall. It was a portrait of an old woman sitting in a chair looking out from the 1920s. They never found out what set off the alarm. Story 10. I was sent to a call late one night in a mountain area. The caller reported people on her property, chanting and holding a baby over their heads. I arrived at the isolated house, surrounded by heavy woods. As I knocked on the door, I heard something move right next to me on the patio, something big. I flashed my light, but saw nothing. I also clearly heard 2 voices inside, a man and a woman. A woman opened the door, terrified. She led me to a security monitor showing the patio where I had just been. I asked where the man was. She looked confused and said she was alone. My partner cleared the house. She was telling the truth. Suddenly the audio on the monitor blasted with a deafening noise like rushing wind, though the night was still. "It's them," she whispered, shaking. She showed me pictures she'd taken of the monitor. At first I saw nothing. Then I scrolled. 2 tall, dark, featureless figures stood where I had been standing. Another picture showed one holding something up. The next showed that object at the base of the door. There was no rational explanation. As we walked back to our cars, my partner jumped in his and sped off. He was spooked. I don't blame him. Story 11. Working patrol, I was flagged down by a disheveled man. He said a woman he didn't know was inside his Winnebago with his son. Inside, we found the woman mumbling, and the son lying on a cot, looking terrified. The woman quickly ran out. Later I saw her walking down the road and pulled up to talk. She mumbled, fidgeting with her hands. Something in her eyes felt deeply wrong. I decided to try an experiment. I began silently mouthing the Lord's Prayer in Old English, making sure she wasn't looking at my lips. I got to the line, "Deliver us from evil." She instantly stopped mumbling. Her head snapped up, her eyes went wide, and she glared at me with pure venom for what felt like an eternity before sprinting down the street and disappearing into an alley. Story 12. I did armed security at a retirement community rumored to be haunted, built over the grounds of an old, abusive orphanage. The night staff would clean the glass doors, only to return later and find small, children's handprints on them. One night, my partner and I went into the empty indoor gym to see if we could experience anything. I took a random picture of the empty space. When I looked at the photo, I saw it. The clear shadow or silhouette of a person standing there, looking down at its feet. We didn't explore much after that. Story 13. I used to be an ambulance attendant for a funeral home. I witnessed something that convinced me the dead are truly present when a person is dying. A woman in our town always drenched herself in Shalima perfume when she passed. Her daughter sprayed the same perfume on her mother in the casket. Months later, her 17-year-old grandson was in a car crash. As we loaded him into the ambulance, he began talking to dead friends and relatives, not unusual for the dying. But then he looked up at the empty space beside him and said, "Granny." At that exact moment, the entire rear of the ambulance was permeated by the overwhelming scent of Shalimar perfume. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. Story 14. My mom was a nurse who worked the night shift. One night, a patient began rambling that a nurse was demanding she get out of bed. My mom knew all the other nurses were with her at the station. Then the patient said, "The nurse in the gray uniform." My mom then noticed the bed sheets had been neatly folded back to the end of the bed. This continued for 3 months. A different patient each time, all complaining about the gray nurse, all with their sheets perfectly folded back. It was a uniform that hadn't been worn in that hospital for decades. Story 15. I was a flagger for a road crew. I'd just come from a doctor's appointment where I received some crushing news about my fertility. My head wasn't in the game. Driving back to the worksite, I was looking for my turnoff and didn't see a large truck pulled off just ahead. I was coming up way too fast. All of a sudden, a voice, clear as day, right behind my ears said sternly, "Look up." I looked up, saw the driver out of his truck, and swerved, narrowly missing both. Had I not heard that voice, I would have hit him. There was no one else in the truck with me. Story 16. My sister was a security guard in the 80s. She was helping a bartender close up a bar one night when they both felt an overwhelming sensation of being rushed, of being pushed toward the exit. My sister said it felt like someone was physically nudging her. The bartender felt the same, almost hearing a whisper, "Go get out of here." They both left immediately. 5 minutes later, the bar burst into flames. An arsonist had been setting fire to the shopping center. The bar, because of all the alcohol, burned to the ground. Story 17. I was a phlebotomist in a hospital. I went into a room for a midday blood draw. The patient, an elderly woman with dementia, was awake and happy. I greeted her, and as I started to draw her blood, she said, "I'd like you to meet my husband." I then heard, from the bench directly behind me, the distinct sound of a man clearing his throat. I turned to smile and greet him, but there was nobody there. The bench was empty. The door was closed. I turned back to the patient who was still smiling peacefully. I didn't press the issue of her ghost husband. I just finished my work and left.